and the R1 application deadlines. We will look at some of the skills that are in hot demand, for example, post MBA. And we will also talk a little bit more about how to stay motivated during your GMAT prep, right? Because it's not a sprint, it's really more of a marathon. And then it can be easy to sort of lose motivation, lose focus a little bit. Now, of course, when you're preparing with us, then all of you know that we are pretty active in terms of the doubt solving group, in terms of mentorship calls, in terms of addressing your queries, but normal day-to-day fatigue can definitely set in, right? So we need to also ensure that we stay on top of that and address those effectively, right? And we will also talk a little bit more about the official material, of course, of GMSC and how you can leverage the official material to enhance your prep. And we will also talk about the new upcoming offerings that GMSC has in terms of its official materials and content, right? So over to you, Seema. If you could maybe turn on your video and I'll make
My video is on. Can you
great.
see me?
Awesome. And I'll just grant you the host access as well, so you can
Perfect.
share your presentation.
All right. Hi guys, I'm super excited to be here, and I'm excited to actually see a lot of people joining in on a Saturday. While the
Yeah,
best thing.
yeah. You're in hot demand over here, so I realize the
because
amount of pains you took to be
Yeah,
here.
because I'm sure that as working professionals or students, the first thing that you can actually think of is going to sleep or grabbing some much needed sleep, right? But then, yeah, let's actually learn first and then sleep later, because I mean, I guess the idea is to make sure that you get your goals straight and plan ahead in terms of exactly how you need to move ahead with this particular journey. I'm going to share my screen. A couple of things. It's basic hygiene. I'm just going to talk a bit about GMAC, of course, the Focus Edition. And as I go through that, I will address some of the things that Param has been speaking about as well. But feel free to actually drop in your questions as we go through, because I think it's really important, no matter how big or small you think a question is, to get those doubts cleared, because you have any sort of doubt in your mind that becomes a hindrance. Sneha, I think your
Yeah, if you
mic
could
is not
maybe turn
muted.
off
Oh,
your.
thank you so much. So I'm just going to share my screen. Param, let me know if you can actually see that.
Sure, sure.
And so here we go.
Yep, yep, I can see
Perfect.
the presentation. Perfect.
All right. All right. So let's just a moment. All right, we got this running. So let's kick off with what I always like to start off with, which is what is Graduate Management Admission Council, or who is Graduate Management Admission Council? Because it's important for you to actually understand the moment you think about a business master's or management education. It's a global mission-driven association of leading global business schools, and the whole purpose is to make sure that you find the best fit business education for yourself, and business schools can also find you, and we make sure that you have the right tools, right resources to facilitate that specific journey, right? We of course own and administer not just the GMAT exam, but also the EA, the executive assessment used for EMBA programs, and the NMAT exam, which is used for MBA programs in Africa, as well as some of the East Asian countries, and one or I think school in Hungary as well. But at the end of the day, we are here to talk about the GMAT, and just to give you a sense of, it's not just limited to one assessment. Plus, if you go back, you can see that we have a cohort of resources like the official prep, we have the business because, the grad select, skill insights, your business fundamentals, the tours. Each actually facilitate your journey in some manner. The tours connect you with the business schools. The business because actually gives you information. The grad select makes sure that the business schools can actually see you and find you. All right. So we'll dive into a couple of things a little later, but right now, why should you even think about management education? And I'm sure that you've already made that decision. If you're still somebody who's kind of on the fence and thinking about it, according to a prospective student survey, one of the highest reasons, or one of the biggest reasons why people in general wanted to actually get into this management education or higher education and management education was for making sure that they enrich their life and they get to develop the potential. Of course, income and knowledge and network, all of those things are definitely a given when you think about an MBA program or a business master's program, right? um, but I also want to address one more important thing, because we have a lot of micro credentials nowadays. We have courses that you can actually take up and do. But according to our corporate recruiter survey in 2023, you could see that employees with the the employers actually think that employees with the graduate business degrees are more likely to be successful in an organization, and they are more competitive when you compare a actual business degree versus a micro credential, just a micro credential. I'm not saying that it's not important. It's really important to upskill. It's really important to actually get all of those micro credentials. But at the same time, having a full-fledged business master's degree really does make all the difference, especially through an employer's eye. Now, talking about the significance of a GMAT exam. So let's start with this. When you think about a management education, the first step or the first point that you start off with is definitely the assessment, the GMAT exam, right? And when you think about GMAT exam, automatically as Indians, we are prone to thinking that, oh, if I get a certain score, then that's like a cutoff. And if I don't get beyond that specific score, I will not make it. Or if I go below the specific score, these are the consequences. But the fact is, it is one component of an entire pie. Okay. So when you think about admission into the top business schools, it is made up of various aspects. You have your work experience, especially when you think about an international MBA, because you need an average work experience of about like maybe 3 to 4, 4 to 5 years of experience. You have the essays that showcase where you're headed at with respect to your career goals, the kind of initiatives. When I say extracurricular, it's also the kind of initiatives that you have taken up in your past years, and how have you actually drawn towards a passion, or taken the steps to make sure that you contribute to the society. All of these things actually play a big role in getting you the admit that you really want. And what GMAT does is, so imagine the situation in a global environment. There are a lot of people, thousands of people applying to business schools, including from India as well. Some people have amazing academic records, I mean, like really strong academic record, really relevant work experience, where, some of them would have done different kinds of maybe internships or other initiatives. Amongst all of these things, what GMAT does is a competitive score will help you stand out. It differentiates you from other people. So that's the point with which you have to go ahead into your preparation, or how you want to use a GMAT score into your in your application as well. Sorry. And let's talk about what are the benefits you have. Like, how does GMAT really help? What role does it actually play? Or when you think about other assessments also, why should you specifically take the GMAT exam? Now, GMAT is not a one-stop solution. Let me just start off with that. When you see the exam, it is built, it has been designed for assessing certain skill sets that are required to succeed in a business school environment, and also succeed in your career after, which is obviously why it's the number one most used assessment by global business schools. And you find that 9 and 10 new MBA enrollments are actually made using a GMAT score. And if you want to look at you know GMAT versus other exams, you can actually go to the class profiles of various business schools, and you'll find that about 60 to 70% of the intake happens, or the class composition is from students who have taken the GMAT exam. So that's just facts for you guys, right? And if you don't believe me, you can go ahead and actually look up the class profile. So that's going to give you some insight. And again, comparing it to other exams, 7 and 10 actually rely on the GMAT exam to get into the top B schools as well. So I've already explained the fact that it's a balanced admission process. But besides standing out, is it really necessary? Well, I know scholarships are super important for you guys, because when you think about a business education, when you think about an MBA, that's a lot of commitment, financial commitment that you will be making, right? And you want to make sure that you want to ease that burden a bit, and scholarships are one way, and GMAT is one of the eligibility criteria in the scholarships, in the scholarship process. And it does open up a lot of doors to various kinds of scholarships, which you should go to individual university websites to explore. Merit based, need based, diversity and inclusion based, there are various kinds. And external bodies, government based. So the possibilities are endless. And lastly, while it's not a mandate, having spoken to various GMAT test takers and people who have gone to do their MBA or a business master's, often they have spoken about how even for their internships, that having a GMAT score kind of like gave them a leverage, right? It's not a mandate or it's not a must have, but it's a good to have. And even when you go for your employment, future employment, it is a testament to your skill sets. Just giving your perspective as to, where all this is going to really help you. Now, let's kind of wind up this particular aspect with the acceptance itself. Over 7,700 programs actually use a GMAT score for their admissions, right? And that's a huge global reach when you get at that. But if you have been considering just, let's say, international education, I also want to open your mind to the possibility of doing using the GMAT for doing an MBA in India, because GMAT is AICTE ratified. That means it's alongside CAT, MAT, ATMA, and other exams for 2 year full year PGDM programs. And the PGP programs. You know that the big name ISB is out there. You have other schools like XLRI, you have SB Gen, and about 200 business schools are there. Here are some of the smaller list, but over 200 schools. You can actually look them up on mba.com. I'm going to quickly move on to GMAT Focus Edition and probably kind of like talk a bit about the score and how do you actually look at the score, and especially when you're applying to the top B schools. Now, I'm not going to deep dive into how great the GMAT Focus Edition is. Obviously, it's great. All of the changes that have actually happened is giving more control to you guys. It's actually reducing stress a lot from what the older version was. The experience is efficient, the duration is shorter, there's less stress, more flexibility, both in terms of test taking and score sending. And of course, even if you did want to retake the exam, you get detailed insights that will actually help you get better at it. Now, quickly going through the focus, you have your 64 questions in your 2 hours, 15 minutes with a total score range of 205 to 805. Your quant, verbal, and data insights are the 3 sections. 45 minutes duration, age 60 to 90 is the score range for each section. Quant has 21, verbal 23, and data insights 20 questions. So if you look at the earlier format versus now, it's just that the format has changed. The recalibration to the algorithm has done, but questions have not essentially changed much. So you have problem solving in quantitative reasoning. If you're somebody who thinks that, math is not my thing, trust me, I don't like math either. But the fact is, GMAT is not about, quantitative reasoning is not about math as such. It's a lot to do with applying your fundamental knowledge. That would be like 8th to 10th grade math maximum into real world situations, or using that to problem solve in business scenarios. So that's more about, simple foundation level this thing and applying that. When you think about verbal reasoning, it is not testing you on English. There are, English proficiency tests for that if you're actually going to different countries. But verbal reasoning in GMAT is testing you on your reasoning skills, your ability to actually use information that has been given to you to make well thought out, well informed decisions, logical decisions, And that's what reading comprehension and that's what critical reasoning also does. And data insights, guys, not math. Okay, let's start with that. It's, I don't want you to just go into it thinking that, oh, you know what, this is like, this looks too math heavy. It's just numbers, and numbers actually speak stories, and that's what you need to remember. And trust me, I've already told you that I've always been very number averse. But over a period of time, when you actually start working with it, when you really deep dive into it, you find that it's actually fun. And there's a lot of things that numbers can actually speak to you guys as well. So keep an open mind to that. You have multi-source reasoning, table analysis, graphics interpretation. This is just data literacy. Let's leave it at that. It's your ability to look at, because Amazon is not going to sell 10 parcels just because you're not comfortable with actually looking at bigger numbers. Nobody's expecting you to calculate bigger numbers anywhere. All right. It's just gleaning out the most important things to make well-informed decisions. Again, if you
And
see,
also, if I could chime in for a minute, I mean,
of
as a
course,
manager, you're expected to deal with numbers, right? I mean, as a good level manager, you'll be working with graphs, you'll be reading reports, you'll be reading documents, which is what the critical reasoning and reading comp section tests you on. And
yeah,
although I agree that to a certain extent, maybe the quant problem solving is not something that you'll be doing in real life day to day as a manager, but also math really tests you more, or it definitely shapes your problem solving skills, right?
absolutely.
Whether you're able to select numbers, whether you're able to identify extreme edge cases where the inequality does not fit, right? All of them shape your problem solving skills and your logical reasoning skills which will eventually help you when you're analyzing bigger data sets. And the same goes for data insights, right?
I'm a convert. So let me
Absolutely.
tell you that I'm a convert, all right, because
Hmm.
I hated math. Like I would
Correct,
see that
correct.
and I'll freeze. But now that I've actually started engaging more with it, it is so
Hmm.
much fun. It's so much fun.
And also when you're sort of looking at the bank balance, then a good understanding of numbers
Yeah,
help.
yeah. I mean, you like those numbers, isn't it?
So that's what an MBA gives you, right? Cool.
Makes complete sense. But yeah, anyways, moving on, talking about skills, like there's a reason why I kind of like, stayed on data insights a bit.
Mhm.
If you really look at the kind of, so again, from a corporate recruiter survey, if you look at the skills that are really essential and employers actually feel are going to be really relevant in the future, if you look at the top right, you would actually find that data analysis and interpretation is right there on the top. It's important, and it's going to continue to be important in the next 5 years. And which is why GMAT as an exam is most aligned to a management education, because that's literally what it is teaching you. Something that you require. It is really necessary for you to actually use in obviously your business education, but that's something you're going to need to use in your employment as well. I always say this, do you want to just like take some exam, just get into a program, or do you want to take an exam that's going to give you those necessary skill sets, which is going to really, transform the way you actually function? And you'd find that decision making process is another skill that's there. Obviously, the typical skill sets are there. Technology is a very important aspect, especially with AI coming in. And the integration between technology and management education has become really, I think it's seamless. The transition is pretty seamless. It's very fused together, and which is also why, I mean, if you're somebody from a tech background, it's really helpful now, because in the past you would be like, oh my god, you know what, I am completely from let's say a tech background, does it make sense, would I be able to really pick it up? But even somebody who's from, let's say, an arts or humanities or law as well, this is something you can easily transition into. I mean, you have the opportunity to actually gain those skill sets. And because most of the MBA programs, most of the business masters program now integrate that technology into their management education, the learning of technology into their management education. And of course, you have the media communication skills. And very interestingly, cross-cultural skills as well is something that, corporate recruiters have said that it's important for them, because, interacting with people, connecting with people, because it's a small world. So you just have to make sure you keep that in mind. Talking about the benefits in terms of features of the Focus Edition, you can go back and edit responses, just 3 responses, but you need to make the well-informed decision as to how you need to go back while you go through the questions. Make sure that you don't get stuck at one question. Make an educated guess, mark, move, and come back later towards the end. You still have the ability to select the section order. More control now because you can decide what comes first, second, and third. You have a 10-minute break that you have to take either up to the first section or after the second section. You can, it's an optional 10-minute break. And of course, accommodations. Basically, I mean, I'll come back to the accommodations a little later, but now another thing is probably another stress point rather, if somebody wanted to retake the exam, they didn't have a lot of insights into, what were they going wrong in. And this is really important. It was available in the form of a paid report, which is called ESR. But with the Focus Edition, you actually get all of those detailed insights in your official score report itself. And you can select the score that you want to send to the business school. That means all of the scores, or let's say if you written the exam 5 times, all the 5 scores do not actually get sent to the business schools. Just the score that you want to get sent, that gets sent, right? And there are 5 free score reports, which you can decide to send to the business school after, let's say, whenever your official score report gets made available on your official the mba.com official account. Just remember that, once it's made available, you have 48 hours to actually make that decision. So do make sure that you do not waste that opportunity, because any additional score report, you will be paying an additional fee of $35. But so keep that in mind and make the best use. You wouldn't be applying to a lot of business schools, so it's always good to kind of like do your research early. Now, chiming in on what Param actually mentioned right in the beginning about, the importance of actually starting early. So there are various kinds of rounds. So you might be applying to, let's say, USA or Europe. Different regions have got different timelines in terms of application. And US generally, their rounds start with, let's say, in September onwards. And what you really have to do is get your GMAT exam out of the way. If you're planning to you apply, don't keep it for the last moment. I would rather say that now is the right time to prep, and within a month or two, or maybe like maximum 3, which is more than sufficient time for you to actually prepare. Register for the exam, continue your preparation, go ahead and take the exam, get it out of the way. If you did want to retake the exam again, at least you have some gap to make that decision. If you keep the exam for the last moment, that would be a bigger challenge. Now, the reason why I'm also asking you to take the exam early is not just because of that. It's also because you do have to put in a lot of effort into the admissions. Your essays, that's one of the make or break deals also. That's one place you really get to showcase your abilities, one place that you get to um, bring your personality out, and you need to give your due diligence to that. So make sure that you actually have sufficient time, not keeping it for the last moment. It's an entire yearly exercise in itself, so make sure you do that, right? And of course, if you want to retake the exam in a year, you have 5 attempts in a rolling calendar period, but there is a 16-day waiting period between 2 appointments. Keep that in mind when you have to plan also. um, and of course, I was just talking about accommodations. If you're somebody who's got special needs, and you need extended testing time, additional break, or technology, or any sort of resources, there is accommodations available for that. You have to meet certain eligibility criteria. You have to produce the documents from the doctors, and you will be given, that resource or flexibility when it comes to the actual exam. So if you do have something of that sort, do not hesitate to actually reach out to the customer care team and try to identify, what path you could potentially take.
And just one quick point, which I would like to mention. So Seema, I think, has said on this slide that you can write the GMAT online and in test centers. But if you're applying to, let's say, for instance, at least ISB and a few other business schools, which are the top of the table business schools, it's always a good idea to write it in center, because of various obvious reasons, and also because ISB has a policies just released earlier this year that they don't accept
Yeah.
online GMAT.
So I generally recommend that everybody write the exam at the test center.
Absolutely. Same.
And if you are in a position where you need to take the online exam, you need to really, go check the business schools where you're applying to beforehand and see if because it's an entirely school decision, right? So you need to actually check with the schools whether they're taking the online exam or not. But otherwise, if there's a lot of test centers everywhere. So if you are in a position to go and take it at the test center, please do go and take it at the test center. And remember, GMAT does have an 8-time lifetime limit. That means you can take the entire GMAT exam 8 times. Honestly, I don't think you would be needing more than that. But yeah, and especially with the GMAT Focus Edition, I'm sure that people are actually going to achieve this course in the get-go. And I need you to actually move forward with that positive mindset because when you think about exams, you're like, oh my God, that's like such a hard thing. Not really. I think we make it difficult in our own minds. So
Mm,
you just need the right approach to the preparation, is what I honestly feel. Um, for those of you thinking, oh, you know what, when the GMAT focus changed, do the business schools know about it? So just a couple of insights from the top B schools here. I mean, these are quotes from business schools. You have Yale School of Management talking about the usefulness of the GMAT exam, and they feel that the GMAT focus is a positive step. If you look at Patty Brown from HEC Paris, they're talking about how they feel that it gives a very comprehensive view of a candidate's potential to excel. That means it's a predictor of academic success in the business school. And if you look at INSEAD, I really love the fact that they are really excited about the new data insights section. And while integrated reasoning was a separate section in the earlier version, because it was a separate section rather, most of the candidates did not take it seriously, and they thought that, oh, you know what, I just focus on the total scope. But you know what, the business schools did look at it because that was an important criteria for them. And especially consider, how do we train our candidates or our students for the jobs, future jobs? And that's something you need to also keep in mind. Now moving to the score scale and the acceptance, and I know Param spoke about how do you have to actually look at the score range when you look at the top B schools also. We'll get to that. So we already spoken about how the new score range is 205 to 805 in increments of 10 and 60 to 90 in increments of 1. Let's first start with the acceptance of these scores. There's only GMAT focus now. So obviously, the schools are going to continue accepting the GMAT, which GMAT focus, which eventually is going to be just the GMAT. Let's just putting it simply.
mm,
Um, Yes, the schools are going to receive the previous course because there is a 5-year validity period. Do they have preference for one over the other? Absolutely no, because each of the exam in its own right does this job that it is actually meant to do, show a candidate's preparedness for the business school education. And if they did want to kind of compare the scores between the Focus Edition and the earlier version, all they would look at is the percentile ranking. Okay, so if you want to check out the percentile ranking, you can look it up on the MBA.com. The concordance table is actually available there. So another question, when it comes to percentile ranking, I know it's been some time that we, already Focus Edition has taken over. But when we look at the earlier version of the scores, it looks really huge, right? It'll be like, oh, 790 is the score. And when you look at a 790, it does a Focus Edition score look actually lower? Or let's say a 770 looks like a 755. So is that a challenge? But the fact is, you cannot compare the scores directly. Let's start with that. What you need to look at is the percentile ranking. This is a very summarized version of the percentile ranking that you're seeing here.
mhm.
There's a detailed version which is available on, on the mba.com, do make sure that you actually look there. So the score has not gotten lower, it has just been normalized. And you cannot actually have something that just, let's say, a score, or um, the curve that stays, what do you like, without any change with the change in the test population. So which is also why it was really essential to make sure that it was recalibrated, and the score was again normalized to really reflect on the true potential or the true performance of the candidates. So this is actually good for you, because now you don't have to think about, oh, I have to get a 790 or a 800 to actually succeed. Every small score that really makes a huge impact, because that really is, reflective of your capacity or your potential. So there's a really good capacity to kind of like stand out to the business school. So it's a positive change. Now,
And one point that I'd like to very quickly mention, Seema, if I could chime in maybe for a minute. So I'll just
mhm,
share one slide of mine. So I'll just disable your screen sharing
sure.
for 1 minute. So one important point is, and this slide I use just to show the importance of verbal, but the same idea also applies to quant and so on and so
Mhm.
forth, that on the GMAT Classical Edition, the overall composite was what ultimately the admissions committees looked at, right?
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of that was also because the 700 score or the 700 plus score, that if somebody got that score, then that sort of almost ensured that they had a minimum verbal percentile of 71, right? Because even if you had a Q51, the only way you could get a 700 score is a V34, right? Now, on the GMAT Focus Edition, for instance, right? So this, for instance, is one of the scores of one of our students. He had a Q88, DI83, and a V76. So that's a 655, which if you look up in that concordance table on MBA.com, which I strongly recommend you to, so that would roughly be a 91st percentile, right? But then the point is that somebody can get a 90th percentile and above, even if they score, for instance, a 25 percentile in verbal or even a
Yeah.
30 percentile in quant, right? And then what a lot of the top universities, at least two, that is HEC Paris and INSEAD, have done is that they have said, no, no, we will not just look at the overall composite score. So you can't get a 25th percentile in verbal and have a 92nd percentile and, sort of have you join our program. Instead, they have also introduced these sectional cutoffs, right? And they have also mentioned that it's strongly recommended or strongly encouraged, obviously means that it pretty much becomes, the law, right? So 68th percentile cutoffs in all of the sections is recommended. So a balanced score, which Seema spoke of, is really important, because earlier what you could have is, for instance, a very disbalanced or an unbalanced score and still have a score of 730, 740 or beyond, right? And there weren't any of these sectional cutoffs, which are sort of there in the GMAT Focus editions and certain AdCom decision-making processes. And the importance of verbal still hasn't gone away, right? So although there's this misconception that the GMAT Focus is not just quant heavy or quant driven, there is a lot of focus on quant, data insights, numbers, etc. Verbal ultimately still plays a critical role in your
Yeah.
overall score, because a lot of data insights, for example, MSR, two-part analysis, tabular analysis, the sorts of questions that you get, the conditionals, the inference-based questions, a lot of those are verbal heavy skills.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's all that I have to say. All right, so over to
Yeah,
you.
I mean that's important insight also, because when you look at data insights, it's you need to enable. Okay,
Yeah.
when you look at that, it's really important to understand that data insights is not just data related. When you look at data sufficiency and other questions, you have critical reasoning based questions also. But anyways, what I would suggest is take a free practice exam. If you've not already taken the exam, get your practice in the skill insights, go to the official starter kit, and get some practice in, just to get a sense of exactly how the questions actually look like. Now, quickly going to, how do you look at the scores? One is obviously, as Param actually showed the breakdown, but also in terms of percentile ranking, or how do the schools if you really want to compare the older version, is which is what this business schools have shared on the website for the percentile ranking, or the last class intake, because that really helps you understand, what is the competitive score I really need to aim for. Go to the class profiles. I've already mentioned this before. Going to the class profile and looking at what is the composition, or what does it entail? What kind of streams do PA students come from? What kind of scores have they actually got? That's going to give you a lot of insights into, are you a really good fit for that business school? What are your chances for getting through with the respect to the admissions? These are really good insights to have. So I would strongly suggest that you do a bit of research. Now, so if you look at Harvard 2025 class profile, you'll see that the score range is about 500 to 790. If this is for the older version, right? And if you need to actually compare that with what you need to expect from a focus edition, what I would suggest again is take this range, go to the concordance table. You have the older version versus the focus edition scores. Look at the percentile rankings. So that's going to give you a fair insight into what score for the focus edition, or the score range for the focus edition is that you really have to target, or have to probably keep in mind that this is something that I want to actually achieve. If you look at Chicago Booth, the early one was around 600 to 780. And if you look at the Yale School of Management, you'll find that it's around 680 to 760 as well. Now, same thing, you have Wharton class average GMAT score 728, your Fuku School of Business 670 to 760. But again, this is more of, what is the competitive score that I need to really aim for? But if you really want to understand in depth what the schools expect from you, go to the eligibility criteria, look up just like the page that Param opened up for HEC Paris. All of the business schools actually give you the specific eligibility criteria, right? And you need to look that up and have a fair sense. And this can vary from program to program also. So you really need to be clear about what you are actually looking up. So keep that in mind when you're doing your initial research, which is why I said you probably should take your GMAT exam early and focus on all of these things also. Or while you are actually preparing, you do your university research, at least have a couple of business schools you want to apply to in mind, and what are the scores that you really need to aim for. And once you have that, get take your exam, you get the scores, get that done away with, and then continue with your applications. And quickly talking about the prep, we have the official prep materials official guide, the official practice questions. Now, in official guide, you have quantitative review, verbal review, and data insights review, besides the main official guidebook. So the practice material is extensive.
Hmm.
I really want to strongly tell you guys one thing. Please purchase the book. Please purchase the material, because you have access to the online material where you will be able to get the more in line with the exam experience, wherein you can sort by difficulty level, topics, and other factors when you're actually doing your practice than just doing it in a physical book, right?
Yeah.
And of course, your practice question bank, your official practice exams, which is 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. So all of these things that I'm talking about are for purchase. So what is for free? You have two practice exams, 1 and 2, plus the starter kit contains about 70 questions that again you can sort and group into quiz and take practice. Please make sure that if you have not already registered on mba.com yet, go ahead, register on mba.com. Try to take a practice exam, or try to get the skill insights practice done, so that you get some fair sense of how the experience is actually going to be. Param, did you want to add something?
No, I think this is pretty
Yeah.
important, that you should write a mock. And most of you who are attending the session have already completed your classes. A couple of you are beginning your classes, but anyways, you would have written the mocks and you'd have shared your scores with me. But yeah,
Now,
it's
I
really
want to add something here, Param. If you have taken the practice exams, and I'm going to draw this from my experience of actually having trained candidates as well, and of course, talking to various students. you don't magically get an amazing score in the first mock or the practice exam. And
Absolutely.
please don't think that, oh, you know what, I didn't magic didn't happen. That means this is not for me. This exam is not for me. You took the practice exam to get a fair sense of how the exam is. That's it. Okay. And that just gives you a starting point, a benchmark in terms of what are your challenges, what are the growth areas, what are the things that you're really strong at, and that helps you plan. The reason why I've kind of like talked about the study planner is also because that's not the right sequence. You take a practice exam, you get your planning in done right, realistic study schedules. If you attend my other sessions, I always talk about the being realistic in terms of your study schedule. If you're working, don't think that you're going to practice every day.
And
Not
I'll
happen.
also mention one very quick point now that you mentioned it. So even if you have prepared entirely for the GMAT, let's say in terms of the concepts, questions, and you have attended the classes, the first couple of marks are always going to give you a suboptimal score compared to what your true potential is. That's because you're still trying to get acclimatized to the environment, right? The
Yeah.
interface isn't really that great. It's blue, white, yellow, all over the place. And also the questions are going to be intertwined, right? So what happens during the classes is that you solve a specific conceptual category question type. And then when that question type is then intertwined between, let's say, other question types, then that's an entirely different experience. For instance, during the classes, you're maybe going to solve CR assumption questions, and you're going to solve two sets of those, right? But during a mock, it's going to be two assumption questions, one weekend question, one passage, one inference question, and so on and so forth throughout the entire section. So the first couple of mocks, irrespective of how well you're prepared, or even if you're just attempting the mock cold, it's always going to give you a suboptimal score. If you're writing it once you have completed your preparation, then the score differential could even be as high as 50 or 60 scale score points, right? This we have seen with a lot of our students, key students who have prepared entirely, and they got, let's say, a 515 or a 545 on their first mock, but they ended up with a score of 695 on the final exam. In fact, the success story I shared a couple of days ago of one of our students, Miss R, she started off with a 545 on her first mock after she completed her classes, but then she ended up with a score of 695, which was a 98 percentile. So don't read too much into the first two mocks. Take it as something that you need to do as part of a task list, and then analyze them with me, and then we will derive the insights and then suggest the next steps and the way forward.
Yeah, I mean that actually makes logical sense also, because when you are see you one is understanding what the content is on an exam.
Mhm.
The next thing is getting used to the exam taking experience.
Mhm.
Because you have selecting section order, what order works for me, and let's say if I go in this sequence, what, so we all have some kind of quirks, I would say. For instance, let's say if I'm stuck at a question, I need to finish this question, only then I will like move on to the next question. So there are some quirks that put us under a lot of pressure, or the moment the exam timer kicks off, and I have a tendency to panic. So you have to, taking the practice exam in the initial stages allows you to understand your quirks and understand that these are the things that I need to work on. And it's just a gradual progress. I always say that review, take an exam, go back, intensely review what went wrong. Call it a WWW, like what went wrong. It really
Mhm.
kind of like helps you understand where do you need to move on from that specific point. So it's always progressive. So yeah, just chipping into what Param mentioned. So with the prep, official prep, you have 6 week study planner as well. One of the things before I wind up with the deck, what I do want to tell all of you guys to do is, if you have not I'm sorry. If you have not actually created, I mean, if you've not opted in for the grad select, so when you sign up on mba.com, you log in also, you get an option to actually opt in for the grad select. What does this do? This actually helps the business schools find you, so they have access to your scores, they have access to your information, and they will actually send you communications or offers. Let's say if there is a waiver, they will actually email you about the waiver. If there is any funding opportunities or scholarships, or they like your profile and they want to send funding opportunities, then they will actually send that across to you. So a lot of times when we generally fill a form, we just randomly fill it without really paying attention to the how or what of it. but make sure that you actually use this to your advantage, and it helps the schools notice you. So do make sure that if you have not signed up, if let's say even in an mba.com at the bottom you'll find that opt-ins, make sure that you actually do. The last thing that I want to tell you guys is when you write enter your name into mba.com, you only have first name and last name, because in India on passport you only have two names, which is the first name and last name. We don't have a middle name. Please don't enter into the middle name. These are very, very small things, but it can forfeit your exam. You know, if there is a mismatch, you can't just go there and say that, but I wrote like this. Well, you have like I say, can't you see? It's like the first name and there's a rule, there is a policy in place, and people have to, at the test centers, they have to follow that policy, and it's no go. It's basic instructions, guys. You need to actually read those instructions and stick to those instructions. I mean, I know that, as a nation, we like workarounds, but it's good to follow policies and rules. It's an international organization. Please make sure you do that.
Same goes
And
for airlines as well. I mean, if you have got a typo on your ticket name, then it's pretty much,
you
very
can't go anywhere. So, not just that, you have to carry your passport when you're going to the test center. Please be mindful of these things. If you have to change your name and birth date, you have to write to the customer care team to change that. Don't do your bookings at the last moment. I have a big problem against this, because if there is any issue by chance, okay, no even the team needs to, you can't just like, because you made a mistake, you can't expect somebody else to actually work. It is like, हाँ इसको problem है तो मैं अब भी इसका sort करूंगा that nobody does that. It's very hard for people to actually do that as well. You have to understand that and be mindful. So which is why you have to make sure you give yourself buffer time. That's the smartest thing to do. When you run your business, when you run any organization, when you do decision making, contingency is a very important aspect.
absolutely.
So
And
you
one
have.
thing which I'll also mention is that the GMAC customer care, customer service team is absolutely awesome. I mean, they would be inundated with requests with all sorts. And so you need to give them 2 to 3 days time, right? I mean, even when I was booking my GMAT for the very first time in 2016, I had a misspelling with my passport,
Mm,
the name that I'd filled up, and they reverted within 2 or 3 days, right? But then you need to give them that bandwidth. You can't just imagine them to, let's say, you drop an email at 11 o'clock in the night, and then they will revert with the email or with your rectification at 11:30 in the night, right? They will also ask for some documents, further material if any is needed. So all that process takes time, right? So at
yeah,
least
yeah.
about 3 days for that rectification to be done.
Yep. But again, talking about documents as well, it's a serious process,
Correct.
because it's an exam. Integrity is very important.
Mm.
So they don't simply just go ahead and change it. ठीक है इसका गलत हो गया तो मैं ठीक है मैं कर दूंगा. That doesn't happen that way. So you have to give them the due time, and the due process has to actually be followed. So keep that thing in mind. And I'm talking to you from experience. Even if you did, like I've had people reach out to me, I can't work magic. I would still reach out to the same team, and say that, there's been this issue, and they need that time to actually, come back with a solution. So do make sure you give yourself to the buffer
And
period.
it's a proper process. You get assigned a case number, a particular
Yeah.
person is assigned against that query, and then they respond to that query and do the rectification from their end.
Right. And so that's it from my end, Param. If you want to take any questions from the
Sure.
candidates.
So I think we have got a few questions, so we'll go
Mm,
drop down. So Manraj had the first set of questions. So Manraj has a two-part question. What if a candidate has exhausted 5 attempts for the rolling year with GMAT online? Is there a provision to give GMAT focus in test center mode for the same year? That's the first part of his question. The
mm.
second is, the total sample set of students in GMAT Classic for the months of December and Jan was very low. I believe it should be GMAT Focus. Anyways, for the months of December, January was very low, 2 to 3 lakh students, which has now increased with the introduction of GMAT Focus to 7 to 8 lakhs. Will it have an impact on the percentile? So I'll just take a quick stab at the second part of this question. So usually, as you would have seen, even on the classical edition, with the number of test takers increasing over a 20-year period, the movement in percentiles was absolutely insignificant, right? For example, in the year
Yeah.
2004, 750 was probably the 99th percentile. By the year 2024, a 750 was a 98 percentile. So whatever slight movements there are on that percentile, because the GMAT is such a standardized exam, and as Seema can attest to this, they have done a lot of testing. I mean, they're smart people. They spend a lot of money on every single question. They've
Yeah.
done a lot of testing before even releasing those marks and those percentile scales, right? So there wouldn't be any drastic movements or shifts in the percentiles.
So that's an example I can give you for that. But though I am just like kind of like confused with the sample set of 2-3 lakhs. I would love to
Mhm.
have that numbers for the GMAT
Yeah,
test takers. Unfortunately, I don't think that that's
I
the
don't think that,
sample set for GMAT test
that
takers.
yeah, that seems
But
too hard.
Param, I mean, we updated our percentile ranking on in the beginning of Jan, right? And
Mhm.
that's with the focus test takers. And every
Mhm.
year, this percentile ranking would be updated. So the first uh, updation, you could see that there's not a lot of difference.
Mhm.
So the projection that's actually made, as you rightly said, is done taking a lot of test
Yes.
cases,
Mhm.
simulations, and running exams, concept test taking.
Mhm.
So that's the basis of that prediction. And after the GMAT focus was launched and people started taking the exams
Mhm.
and the percentile rankings were updated, that change was not a lot. So
Exactly. Maybe 0.1
yeah,
percentile.
that's it. That's it.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Now,
So,
talking about the first one, no, it's not. It's across both the versions of the exam, both the test center and online. So,
mhm.
if across whether it's test center or online, why do you want to take it 5 times in a year? Though I don't mind, but it seems a bit of a stretch, though, because it just seems like again, just I don't think you intend to. But for information, no, it's not for only one version of the exam. It's across both the versions of the exam. Second thing
Mhm.
is, please don't bulldoze through the exams either, guys. There's an 8-time lifetime limit.
Mhm.
And when you go to the next exam, you really need to do your due diligence in going back and understanding where you went wrong.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
give it some space and then take the exam again. I don't think you'll have to take it 5 times because the exam has actually kind of like reduced your stress a lot.
Mm-hmm. I think sometimes probably what happened during the last year was when there was this transition between GMAT Classic and GMAT Focus, a lot of people just tried to retake the GMAT Classic as many times as they could before the GMAT Focus came out because there were certain apprehensions about the GMAT Focus, the scoring scale, etc. And possibly that could have been one scenario. But unfortunately, Manraj, the rules are what they are. Even for ISP, I've seen a couple of articles on LinkedIn where candidates they unfortunately got the scores that ISP wanted on the online version of the GMAT exam, but the ISP disqualified the GMAT online as an acceptable exam from this year onwards. So unfortunately, there was nothing that could be done in those cases. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
work.
it's just, some factors that are not really in our control either. So you really have to talk to the schools about that in terms of what concession they can make as well. Now, I guess.
Sushmita had a two-part question as well. So Sushmita's first question was, she has 6.5 years of work ex in software development. She completed her BTech in computer science engineering in 2017. Should I try for an executive MBA or a full-time MBA? What I've learned is below 10 years of work ex for several programs abroad is not considered for executive MBA.
So
So,
I'll start with that question. You're right.
mm,
I think you can still go for a flagship MBA program rather than an executive MBA program. You do qualify for that. Anything beyond 6 years, I think now is a time that you should definitely apply and then go for the course. If you delay it further, probably then it's like you kind of like wait a bit more and just go ahead and work and apply for an executive MBA program. This is like you're sitting on the most
which
important
the
right time right now.
precipice. Yeah, the precipice. So 6.5 to 7 is sort of just about, borderline.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely borderline.
Hmm. Now, her second question was interesting. Since artificial intelligence, machine learning is the hot topic right now, and since she's from a tech background, how good is it to consider tech-related or data science or AI ML related subjects for the MBA over other conventional subjects like marketing or operations or finance? Will candidates having an MBA in AI ML have a better chance of employment than others, given it's a good business school?
So this is why I love management education, like, business masters and MBA programs internationally. And I think now with, let's say, our Indian programs also offer this flexibility. I think gone are days where you had to kind of like stick to a specific stream and this is all you can actually do. Most of the courses, if you actually see, you might have like a couple of core programs and you have the flexibility to actually choose the other programs. Like early you might have like chosen, let's say, I want to do marketing and this thing, and while you go through the program you realize, oh, this is not my cup of tea, and then you can actually change or pick other line of subjects. So you
Mhm.
do have that flexibility when it comes to any kind of graduate management program. I think a lot of courses these days actually function on those lines.
Mhm.
But see, I would always say this one thing. If it really depends upon what you are aiming for, okay?
Mhm.
Because sometimes, you kind of see, oh, this particular stream looks like I can get big bucks. Do you like that stream? Because
Correct.
you're not going to grow in that stream if you're
Mhm.
not the top notch in that. I mean, if you don't have a passion for it, if you don't
Absolutely.
have the aptitude for it, and trust me, I mean, I did in my younger days, I actually thought on these lines and I realized that that doesn't work. You can't. I started my education with computer science, and I mean, I love it as a subject, or I enjoy it on the side, but I didn't want to work in it. Okay, it was like
Mhm.
parental pressure, the 90s parental pressure sort of thing. But so at least you guys have that freedom now. So pick something that really you enjoy doing. I'm sure that you're going to actually succeed. Yes, AI and machine learning and everything is great. It might be booming, but at the same time, if you have an appetite for it, you like it, you enjoy it, go for it by all means. But you know what? If let's say I'm into marketing, and if you ask me the same question, I wouldn't go for AI. Probably something. If it, I would probably look at, does it have subjects which align to AI being used in marketing? So I would only look at the base level, necessity that's going to
Mhm.
really help me enhance my job than to kind of like deep dive into that as a subject. So that's something you need to keep in mind when you make that decision.
And I think that's a very good point, Seema. I mean, a lot of us do things different professionally compared to what we, let's say, did in our undergrad degree. So even I did
Mm.
my undergrad in software engineering, but now I'm teaching the GMAT, right?
Mm.
And that's something that you really need to figure out for yourself as to what area really motivates you, right? What do you
Yeah.
learn? What is something that you can do day in, day out without getting bored, without
And you
getting
can
tired,
shine.
and
Like
you
you
can
know that
shine.
you're good at it, so
Absolutely. Because if you have the passion, then you will put in the hours and you will shine. You'll make it to the top 1, top 5%, and you'll make good bucks any which way. But you should not select a stream simply because the baseline starting points for an AI ML related job.
everybody's saying it's good. This is booming. This is trending. I
Correct.
mean,
Correct.
so
Absolutely. Because if you're not going to do very well, then you're going to be out of a job in
yeah.
3 or 4 years' time maximum, or you'll get burnt out. And then that's not going to help anybody, right? So find out what really motivates you, what really drives you, right? Because then even if the starting salaries are slightly lower, if you're able to progress, you'll end up making much more than if you're stuck in an area which you don't really like, but where the starting salaries were slightly higher, right? I mean, all of these jobs or all of these fields, you should not join just because you're looking to make money. There are other jobs to make money, right? I mean, do investment banking, that will bring you the most bucks, right? But then the amount of hours you'd have to put in would be crazy, 19, 20 hours a day, and that will burn you out pretty quickly. So passion, that's
Right. So with I think you asked about if there is any issue at the test center.
hmm. That's even better.
Ideally, you reach out to the Pearson VUE team because those are the people who actually, conduct the exam. But if you're not getting the resolution, or if you're not getting the solution that you're looking for, and see, again, you have to understand one thing. This is a case to case basis. Maybe your case is really genuine, and the team really has to actually go back and decide whether your case is a genuine one or not, because there could be people who might actually misuse. that situation also, or kind of bring up a situation which is also not there. So, which
Mhm.
is often why you would find, as Param said, they do need a couple of days to go back and check with their, other team and really investigate into this. When the team says that they're investigating into the matter, by God, they're investigating into the matter because they just have to be absolutely sure. But at any point you don't get a resolution, it's a genuine case, you don't get a resolution from the Pearson View team, you reach out to the customer care at mba.com, and you raise that issue again and say that you have this issue, and the resolution actually varies case to case basis, but you will get a resolution.
True. So that is one of the ideas. Usually in such cases, if there is a test center issue, unless it's a major issue, for example, if the electricity went off for the entire day or something like that, generally you're not going to get refunds or retake attempts for 5-minute breaks or 5-minute outages. Usually it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a short this thing, or if it's a recurring problem, let's say, what, it happened once, it happened twice, but you know that, you're kind of like, you're mentally off. So you need to take a stand there. And sometimes again, I think I can speak for a lot of people. Let's say if I'm in that situation earlier on, I would have been very reluctant. Do I do this or do I listen to them? I might want to shout at them and like, what's happening? I don't want to do this. Find me a solution for this. But I'll be like, I'll still listen to them and just like go ahead and do this. You're a bit meek sometimes in taking a stand there. So you need to
Mhm.
actually take a strong decision to not continue it, and probably ask for the
Mhm.
right resolution in that situation, because you are like, that you're disturbed. You'd know that you wouldn't be able to perform. So take a stand in that situation. But if it's like a shorter this thing duration, and it's one small this thing and it's got fixed and it goes through, then, and you've completed your exam. I mean, you chose to complete that exam, isn't it?
Mhm.
So that's another so again, I don't think I'm the right person to give you in a lot of insights into this, because it really varies a lot. I know that the customer care team is doing a brilliant job. They have their hands full, but they do try to make sure that everybody gets their fair resolution.
Mm-hmm. And also the other thing is that if you sort of felt that the issue was so disruptive that you couldn't complete your test,
Mm.
when you say to the team that, okay, this is it for the day, I'm not proceeding ahead with the test, then you also give your case a lot more evidence later when it
Exactly.
sort of gets accelerated to the GMAC customer care team, that the situation was indeed so distressing that you couldn't write the test. But then if you wrote the test end to end, and I do understand कि बीच में अगर कुछ break आता है, then it does have a disruptive effect on the entire test. You're thinking about the break, those questions. But still, even in that case, the customer service team will say, well, it wasn't so disruptive that you couldn't complete the test. And most of the time,
Yeah.
in such cases, the resolution will not be in your favor. That's just how it works generally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same. And
Um.
Aditya had one final question. I think this is the last
Mhm.
that we will take.
Mhm.
As a working professional, somehow you feel that the amount of preparation one has done is incomplete. True. How should we schedule the GMAT exam? Should I first book an exam and prepare accordingly? Or consume all resources? Well, all resources is a bit subjective, but let's say official resources, and then schedule the exam.
I want to say one thing. It's not because you're a working professional. We never feel ready about anything.
True.
I mean, any
True.
kind of exam, we will like, kabhi bhi, matlab, you will not feel like you're ready for anything. Okay. So you just, so I actually recommend that you schedule an exam and then prepare. Have a fair balance of, since you're a working professionals, generally what I have seen is they take about like 3 months, maximum 4 months. In the fourth month, you actually take the exam, especially with Focus Edition. If you see, the older study planner was about
8 weeks.
8 weeks,
Mhm.
and now it's 6 weeks. So which kind of like gives you a fair insight into how much time you really required is really required. This is a process, okay?
Mhm.
One, you have to understand the content of the exam. Two, practice the content of the exam. Third, review where you're going wrong, fix that, keep bettering yourself, take practice exam. As you take the first one, again, review and analyze where you're going wrong, and practice a bit more, take another practice exam, review where you went wrong. And I'm talking about reviewing in detail, okay? By question, by the way that you took the exam. Did I panic? Did I actually kind of do something where I was agitated, or there was anything that was distracting? Did I pick up my call during the practice exam? Was my phone notifications on? Did somebody ring the bell and I was like distracted? Because there are a lot of factors that really affect you in that situation.
Did you pause
So
the
you
exam?
just be really honest.
Mhm.
Sorry?
Did you pause the exam because the
Did you
practice is
pass the exam?
exactly
And so
right?
all of these things are so you review. So that is the way you progress through the entire journey. Okay. And so which is why I feel when you have that goal in mind, you will be disciplined in your approach.
Hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
you don't have that goal in mind, if you, when you not spend the money, this preparation can go on for years, my friend.
True.
And I've seen people prepare for years.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
So yeah, I mean, why? See, I always say this one thing. It's like money sitting in your bank with you not doing anything with it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that for me for courses also. I always feel like, okay, I might do a low hanging fruit, which is like a course I can do immediately. Then keep contemplating and like take up something later. Because in that meanwhile, during my entire contemplation, I did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to make the best use of my time that I have now. Which is, if that's the sad truth of about procrastination, isn't it? If you keep pushing off,
True.
you've really not accomplished anything in that particular gap.
And
So
also a little bit of Murphy's Law that anything that can go wrong usually does go wrong when you do nothing, right? I mean, when you do nothing is something of my addition, but if something can go wrong, usually.
yeah, yeah, but yeah, you should definitely register for the
Cool.
exam. Take it.
Awesome. Okay, so I think those were all the questions. So thank you. Thank you so much, Seema, for joining in, for taking out the time on a Saturday evening. I know your schedule is pretty packed. You're in Hyderabad on another event as well. So really, thank you so much for giving us the time and for such an insightful session. I think all of our attendees found it very useful and very informative.
Thank you so much, Param, and thank you to all the audience as well.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in as well. I hope that you found the session useful and informative. And yeah, we'll keep conducting such sessions with Seema so that it's useful to all of us.
All right, bye-bye, guys. If you want to connect with me, you can actually reach out to my LinkedIn as well. The same name. My second name is so unique. You will find me at any cost if you put in the combination. So look me up. But thank you, Param, again, once again, and to the audience as well. Bye-bye, guys. Have a nice Saturday.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.